Good day, everyone. We are here again with another show, and we are here again with a friend of the show, Mahmood OD, with a beautiful green screen. Welcome, Mahmood.
Thank you so much for having me. Pleasure to be with you again.
It's good to have you. I wanted to jump right into the things that are going on today. You do a lot of reporting, of course, on the Iran war, what's happening in Palestine, etc., etc. And I wanted to ask you a question. And that is, I recently had a long conversation with my brother Dimitri Laskaris about what is happening now with the MOU, the dealings with the United States between, of course, the negotiations between the United States and Iran. And Dimitri said he felt that the pain inflicted on the United States has not been enough. He said that the Strait of Hormuz needed to stay so long closed that the reserves of the United States would literally run out. You would get problems in the society, and that maybe finally the Westerners feel some pain and start to rise up against this illegal
Mm,
war. My question is,
mm.
how do you see the things that happen now, and do you maybe agree or disagree with that?
Wow, I actually like that observation from Dimitri Laskaris because it reflects why you are in an MOU. We are in an MOU because there has been pain. So that's not something that he's, of course, denying. He's saying that it's not enough. Perhaps that could be one thing. However, Iran, I think, very carefully calculated its moves before during the war of aggression and True Promise 4, and it still has surprises for the future. Now, with or without the pain, after every war, you would need to have a diplomatic solution. And from the Iranian side and from the American side as well, you would need to calculate what you can get and what you can't get. The United States wanted to limit its losses. Iran continued to inflict pain. This is where I think an input to Dimitri's comment would be relevant. Let's not forget that the United States, immediately after it assassinated the supreme leader and senior figures in Iran and started the war of aggression with Israel, immediately started talking about talks and negotiations. Iran continued because Iran wanted to inflict pain. It had the exact sentiment and understanding that the United States needs to feel pain. Hence why Iran went to lengths that it never went to before, attacking all of the sources of aggression with the Gulf states, closing the Strait of Hormuz immediately, and not even entertaining the idea of talking. How many times in the beginning of the war of aggression has the American president and figures in the United States administration mentioned talks? Very many times. Iran wasn't even engaging. That frustrated the American administration. It put them in a very tough corner and it put them in a very difficult position. And that was simply because Iran wanted to inflict that pain up until it reached to a stage where Iran felt that the United States suffered to an extent where it would be compelling for it to reach some sort of an agreement with Iran. However, from an Iranian perspective, they have their standards at the end of the day. So, for example, just exactly as the response of Iran was calculated to a T, Iran's expectations following the war of aggression would be calculated too. So, if Iran's red lines were, we're not in the same situation as we were before with the Hormuz Strait, all of our assets need to be unfrozen, we need to be able to sell oil, all of the sanctions will be lifted, including in the United Nations and with the IAEA. You can't talk to us about our defensive capabilities. You can't talk to us about supporting the resistance, and you have no interference with our internal affairs. And they get that through an MOU. Then will they got what they wanted, didn't they? a pool of recovery, a pool of compensation worth 300 billion, 24 billion in assets that will be unfrozen. Iran can sell oil to the United States of America. So all of these are Iranian accomplishments, undeniable. Now, whether they would have gotten more by inflicting more pain, I think that is metaphorical question at the end of the day, because we're dealing with a certain reality, and that reality is Iran actually threatened the United States and Israel before several times. They told them that they will be paying a heavy price if they have an aggression against Iran. And they indeed proved themselves by inflicting the pain that they wanted to inflict on the United States, hence why there are talks. Let's not forget, the United States said surrender. We're not talking with them. We're not talking with terrorists, they told you. They said unconditional surrender. They said a complete regime change and complete regime collapse. None of these things happened. So because they didn't happen, the American side started to say it to themselves. So Trump started to say, "Oh, we have a new regime because we targeted all of the old hardliners, and now we're dealing with moderates." You're not dealing with moderates. You're dealing with people who have the same approach as anyone who was assassinated to a certain extent, because you're dealing with individuals. But all of them are adhering to the establishment of Iran. Iran is a country that has an establishment, that has a system, that has institutions, that has laws, that has understandings. It doesn't operate based on a one man band. They thought that, oh, I'm going to kill the supreme leader, I'm going to take down the whole country. That's not how Iran works, and that's why there was a lot of ignorance also from the American administration, because they weren't even listening to their own intelligence agencies in relation to Iran, who knew that they didn't want to go and get a nuclear bomb, and also that they weren't actually posing an immediate threat to the United States. So Iran did all of that to get certain things that they got. It's in an MOU. An MOU is not legally binding. There's still 60 days from the beginning of the MOU up until we see whether this actually translates into a larger deal or treaty. And for every move, there will be a counter move. I think the Iranian side is very well calculated in that regard.
Yeah, exactly, and it really you it really shows the kind of split you see also when I listen to Iranians discuss this kind of situation. It's very 50-50. So some people say like, "Oh, this is fantastic. This is good. This is on the good direction." Other people say, "No, this is too dangerous. They let the Americans slowly slide into the Iranian society." So my question is, when you see these kind of negotiations, some people say that the Iranians are maybe slowly losing a little bit of momentum. So I'm going to play the devil's advocate here a bit, because of course we all want Iran to do very well. I heard the sentiment, and I want to hear your opinion about that. I heard the sentiment that the Iranians, and this was from some Iranians themselves, should not be so lenient. For example, I heard quite a few people say that after Donald Trump started threatening the Iranian delegation, instead of refusing the photo op, they should have gotten up and walked away, keep their respect. I hear that actually quite a lot. Others are also saying Israel is still attacking South Lebanon. There should be a red line as well. How do you see that, Mahmoud? Do you think that is too strict, or do you see there's something in it? It's a difficult discussion.
I think, listen, with anything that we talk about, you will have different opinions, understandably so. Not everyone will see eye to eye, and that's how things should be like. However, I would differentiate between certain comments that are being made about the negotiation path between the United States for valid reasons or as a real good intention, and other commentary that is intended to instill division in the other side, delegitimize them, and slowly sneak in certain things that are not substantiated. I'll begin with the biggest thing. You know, they always spoke to us about a huge split in Iran. They went and united everyone in Iran. Iran always, the establishment in Iran always had people who opposed it, from within and from outside. People who don't really want to have, for example, religion in politics. People who didn't necessarily believe in the 12er Shia understanding. People who didn't like the rule of the jurisprudent or wilayat al-faqih. Understandably so. They were there in Iran, and guess what? They were much more powerful after the revolution in 1979. There was still a level of opposition. There is opposition to certain things that is totally legit. For example, individual liberty, to what extent you go there and what have you. And we have indeed seen changes in Iran in that regard. And there are other, for example, criticisms that are intended to collapse the country from within. And to deal with them, you would need to deal with each and every one of these statements accordingly. So, for example, if we speak about the negotiations, Iran, the Iranian delegation, doesn't go there with individuals who are going to play around. They go with strict measures on what can be accepted, what can't be accepted. They have a mandate, they have legal professionals, they have economic professionals, they have political professionals, and they know what they're doing. When Trump made that threat, they withdrew from the venue. When they wanted a photo op, they went out. That was an embarrassment for the United States. But in a typical manner, the United States, like other Western arrogant powers, would want to portray this as a victory for the United States and deflect on the Iranian side. Iran is setting the pace. It's not the United States that's setting the pace. They've been setting the pace ever since the war of aggression began. Iran is dictating the conditions. Iran is having every condition that it wants being implemented. And let's reach Lebanon. For the past 2 days, there has been nothing in Lebanon. Clearly, some pressure is working there, but that doesn't mean that it was going to stay there for a very long time. You always need to monitor that. In addition, the Iranian foreign minister spoke with the senior Hamas official Bassem Naim, telling him that Gaza will be included in the talks between Iran and the United States because they're looking for an all-out de-escalation moving forward. Now, that may not be the all-out solution that everyone is waiting for, which is the dismantling of supremacist Zionism all across Palestine, implementing equality. That is the desired objective that any rational person who supports human rights would want: equal rights across the board, decolonizing, in essence, if we want to use the term colonization, or de-Zionize, have the Palestinians have the right for return, equal rights across the board, regardless of your religious or ethnic background. So from how I see it, I'm seeing that no, actually, Iran is setting the tone. Iran is being very strict with its conditions, and had it not had a very big importance in regard to Lebanon, for example, it wouldn't have had Lebanon in the first clause of the memorandum of understanding between them and the United States. The first clause speaks about stopping the hostilities in Lebanon. Lebanon is mentioned several times in the MOU as part of a greater context of de-escalation, but Lebanon was mentioned for the reason of it being an open front. Gaza, there's an official ceasefire that the Palestinian resistance is adhering to. Yemen, there is a de-escalation there because when the cessation of fire happened, when there was ceasefire between the United States and Israel on one side and Iran on the other side, there was a de-escalation there. What was the open front? Lebanon. So from the Iranian perspective, they had to use all of their weight to stop that as a priority. and force Israeli withdrawal. And that red line, by the way, was implemented. Iran gave an ultimatum when Netanyahu attacked the southern suburb of Beirut. Iran attacked Israel and it hit it really hard. Iran acts where other countries talk. Iran was able to impose its conditions by force when multiple other countries that are involved in the so called Board of Peace in Gaza haven't been able to hold Israel accountable and actually force it to stop its hostilities against the Palestinian people. And they will come up with any excuses for it. They will tell you we're using diplomacy, we're trying to use our leverage with the United States, we're asking Donald Trump to apply pressure on Netanyahu, maybe he can stop the attacks. Iran isn't doing that. So I think uh, there is, at the end of the day, going to be a difference in opinion. That is normal, natural, and healthy. However, we really need to identify what opinions are being made that are intended for the good and what comments are being made that are intended to do harm. And I am personally of the belief of sometimes you would need to give some time for things to translate on the ground. I think there's so much rush with people. We're so used to getting everything very instantly that we're not willing to understand how history works. At the end of the day, certain changes take tens of years, they take decades. Certain changes, certain revolutions, certain things to form, the collapse of empires, the change of power, the rise of a multipolar world, the collapse of empires that ruled for hundreds of years. All of these things take a long time. And we're seeing a manifestation of that, but it doesn't all happen in a blink of an eye and within an hour. You will see ups, you will see downs, you will see things moving well, things appearing to move well, and then they're actually not, things going bad, ups and downs. So it's important to observe it in that manner and then judge the situation based on the results, taking into consideration that these aren't actually the final results. At the end of the day, these are the results of a certain development that happened and an escalation in war that took place as part of a bigger battle that is a very long battle.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that all sounds very convincing, Mahmoud. But there is one thing that I am personally a bit worried about as somebody
Mm,
who studies a lot of capitalism and geopolitics. And I don't know what you think. And this is the last question about this. My fear is that with these that the United States has found out that you cannot bomb the Iranians into submission. And if there's one thing Americans, U.S. empire, I should say, always does, it's never stops. It's always scheming. And my fear is that with now with the negotiations and promising to the $300 billion and all these kind of things, my fear is that maybe Iran is opening up its market for, let's say, foreign capital, the Gulf states, the Americans, and slowly they're going to try to, you can almost say, Saudi Arabia-fication of Iran. That's what I think they're going to try. The other way, they try to
mm,
integrate them maybe into the capitalist system by slowly entering the market of Iran and then make him a kind of vessel, like what happened to Egypt, what happened to Saudi Arabia, you name it. Do you think that
mm.
this possibility is there? How do you see that?
I think before I answer that, I'll ask you, what do you fear about that? What are the consequences that you're fearing about that happening?
My fear is once you open up your market, you get foreign investment. Slowly but surely, your whole economic system is going to be run by the United States. And if you have that, you will get a political class that is that is dependent on big capital of these corporations. These corporations are indirectly run by the United States. So you get a society that is dependent on the United States, like most societies around the world. That's why there are so many slave-like societies, except maybe China, Russia to a certain extent, Iran, Cuba, but Venezuela is now already being toppled. And my biggest fear is that that happens to Iran. That there it comes a
Mm.
involvement of the IMF, the World Bank, slowly market integration, and you will see that the United States starts controlling the society.
Mm. I personally think it's quite difficult for them to have a hegemon like approach with Iran, especially because Iran had over 40 years, that's since 1979, to rely on itself, produce its own food, medicine, weapons, rely on itself, build itself under crippling sanctions that were intended to force it to kneel down. Iran isn't in a situation where it is desperate for that foreign support compared to, for example, during the beginning, early stages of the revolution, where they had none of that, and you're coming out from an establishment that was very reliant and supported by foreign powers. So I think it's quite difficult for the United States to come and all of a sudden take over and manipulate everything, and for that to create dependence that Iran would rely on and therefore would have to give political concessions because they can't live without them. It's way too late for that. Iran has its own military industrial complex that is one of the most diverse military industrial complexes in a sense of manufacturing, excuse me, rather than the profiteering side like the United States. Iran manufactures almost everything that it needs for its military. Iran has nuclear knowledge and nuclear development. Iran is a country that relies on its own food, on its own medicine. It has a lot of scientists in the country. They do have good dealings with multiple countries, but they're self-sustained to a large extent. Now, the United States coming with them, we can clearly see when the United States is coming. The United States is coming on the terms of Iran after the war. They're not coming and telling Iran, "Oh, hi Iran, I'm going to give you 300 billion, but here are the conditions. Stop supporting the Lebanese resistance and the Palestinian resistance. Stop developing weapons, stop developing missiles, confirm that you're never going to participate in anything against Israel, and do this and that." On the ground, we're actually seeing the contrary. In the same MOU, Iran is including a resistance movement that is designated as a terrorist organization by the United States and its proxies. And the United States signed up to it, which means that the United States is a protector of a group that it actually wants to dismantle, or said that they would need to get rid of, didn't they? So I think when we understand the details of how Iran is entering this agreement with the United States, that should provide more reassurance on how things are developing moving forward. So, for example, let's say American money goes into Iran. Well, Iran is able to sell oil according to the MOU, and now the US Treasury, the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, said that they have 60 days where they can actually sell oil, and the United States can be a purchaser of Iranian oil. That's an Iranian benefit. Let's say Iran needs certain investment in certain industries, that would be from the United States or from whichever country. So long as they're on their own conditions, so long as there are limits to the interference, so long as you are not crippling your economy by holding it hostage to the IMF or whichever organization that they control or their banking systems, so long as you are doing it on the same level rather than a servant and a master, that's a completely separate story. And it's not possible, it's not really accurate to compare them to Saudi Arabia or even Venezuela. Saudi Arabia built its entire power on the United States. They have bases of the United States. The economy of some of the Gulf countries was completely getting wiped off during a 40-day siege, or not a siege rather, but the 40-day of blocking the Strait of Hormuz, because they rely heavily on imports for basic necessities such as food, such as medicine, and they don't have diversified economies. And they didn't have that period of time where they had their development far away from foreign intervention like Iran did. So if we want to talk about Iran, I'll push it more towards the examples of Russia and China, although they are on different scales, different levels. They have their different geopolitical conditions, different societies. A lot of things are different. But what's similar here is the fact that they are self-made to a very large extent. They have leverage there, and they're not willing to kneel down. China has leverage with its precious metals, for example. Russia has leverage with its strategic location and its energy sector too. Iran has leverage with the Strait of Hormuz. And that's not talking about their arms, their arsenal, their weapons, and all of these things. So at the end of the day, whether a certain administration in Iran accepts trade with the United States and foreign investments or not, I think the way we judge that is by seeing how it actually gets implemented in Iran and studying how it could have either a positive or a negative impact on internal policies in Iran, whether it's to do with productivity, with certain industries in Iran. If, for example, at one point you will tell me, oh, I've looked at X industries in Iran since the United States, assuming that that would happen, and the productivity levels of Iran have reduced. Yeah, well, we'll say, well, that's quite alarming because, well, what if they have a problem? But so far, we haven't even entered that stage. So far, we're only in a situation where uh, elements of the memorandum of understanding are being implemented. It's still too early to judge how far things go, especially seeing as we still don't have a final deal. There's still 2 months. Anything can happen now. Once they finish, once they conclude, and once there is something, assuming there will be after that, then we can have a different conversation and have our own take on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Very well said. Very well said. I want to switch gears a bit for the final, maybe one or two questions. And I want to go towards Israel and Palestine, of course. And
Mm,
I wanted to ask you a question that I almost never hear. And you, of course, as a Palestinian from occupied Palestine, you know Israel as no other. And
mm,
my question is the following. I really never hear this discussion, and this is something that worries me personally a lot. Even so, people are saying, "Oh, and it's the end is near, and the United States and Israel are there. There will be a day that the United States will not support Israel anymore, and all this kind of stuff." But people never discuss the fact that Israel is not just a territorial place. It has become almost a, you can almost say, a syndicate, a crime syndicate, an organization. It's everywhere. It's running Argentinian politics. It's in many African societies. It's all over Europe. It's amazing when you hear it trains police organizations all over the world. It's among spy agencies. It sells spy stuff. It's amazing how Zionist organizations are in so many countries around the world. So my question is, even if Israel as a territorial place would fall, it's so deeply embedded around the world. How do you see that activism, that battle against that play out, Mahmoud?
I think any activism needs to be based on a certain criteria, and it needs to come with an understanding of your capabilities and what you're going against. So, if you're speaking about Zionism, for example, and you said about Zionist infiltration in police, for example, or intel agencies, or Zionist influence in the media, or Zionist influence in religious organizations and institutions, activists, anything, art, Hollywood, whatever it is. Firstly, as activists, our duty is to understand, okay, what am I up against here? If uh, Karim and Mahmoud are in media and they talk and they have podcasts and they talk about current affairs, we'll say, well, do you know what? I think this is a suitable field. So I'm understanding what am I able to do here? What can I do? You have another friend. Your friend is a lawyer. There are many legal cases being taken against IDF soldiers who participated in the genocide. There are legal firms who are working relentlessly as advocates for Israel to intimidate and terrorize individuals who criticize Israel. That lawyer would say, do you know what? I have a background in law, therefore, I'm going to spend the time that I have on my hands during my day to try and see who I can support, what cases I can support. Police officers in whichever country, if they feel like there is an infiltration, for example, in Britain or in any other country, tell you, do you know what? It has been proven that Israel or the police uses technology that is tied to Israel and Zionism, and that actually goes against our sovereignty and our independence as an organization. So I'm going to try and talk about it, and I'm going to raise awareness about it, for example. So it begins with that, with as simple as, rather than looking at the whole scope and the entirety of things, which is important to identify what you're dealing with, to see what you can do and what results you can achieve. So, from my perspective, one more person who knows a bit of information, that's an accomplishment. One individual who started to understand something better or has a clearer vision, has a better understanding of the truth, perfect. That's amazing. If you're a solicitor or in law, if you, for example, supported someone get a case where he was proven not guilty because another arbitrary firm in the hands of Zionists did something and you made him succeed, great. A religious organization battling, for example, against Christian Zionism or Muslim organizations who are sympathetic to Israel or whatever it is, or individuals. I think this is how we view it as activists, because we need to understand what's in our hands, what powers do we have and we're capable of, and then we simply implement them rather than have an all out expectation of a total and absolute victory that will make you feel like, well, oh, I'm actually helpless because, well, nothing works. And the evidence is on the ground. Look for the past 3 years how many individuals, simple individuals, made an impact on their society, on their country, on people across the world with certain either content that they had online or certain activism or a photo that was taken of them when they were arrested by the police for protesting against the genocide, whatever it is. Because all of these small things, they are part of a big puzzle in the grand scheme of things. And once we look at every part as a piece of the puzzle, we start to understand what we need to do and where we are going in the grand scheme of things.
Excellent, excellent. That's such a good advice because I totally agree with you. I'm somebody who often thinks about the very big picture, the macro aspect of it all, and you're absolutely right. You become hopeless then. You think this is such
Mm,
an immense beast. How can you do that? But when you start step by step, like a Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu once said, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And I think you just
totally.
explained the exact same thing. I think that's such an important advice. Mahmoud, I know you're in a hurry. Can I ask you one last question?
Sure. Yeah.
Final question. Where do you, because sometimes with the whole Iran war, people stop talking, or at least it gets a bit snowed under the whole situation in Palestine, of course, which is also something that can feel very, very painful and demotivating to a lot of people. My question to you is, what do you see? Where do the Palestinians right now stand? Do you think the whole situation with Iran is hopeful also for the Palestinians? Um, Maybe you have a different opinion. How do you feel things are going right now? Is there any hope? Let me be blunt. Do you see there any hope for the Palestinians right now?
I see that there is more hope than ever for the Palestinian case simply because more people than ever in any given moment in history know about the Palestinian suffering and the evil roots of Zionism. Simply for that reason. Iran is 100% indirectly connected to Palestine. You can't separate the two. Iran's wars with Israel and the United States happened after the Palestinian resistance operations against Israel and Israel's genocide in Gaza. Everything is connected. Any victory for Iran is a victory for Palestine, even if there are certain things that can't be seen immediately on the ground. And there is a reason why there are certain things who aren't seen on the ground now. It's because Israel and the United States don't want to show the whole world that there is any hope or any point in resisting them because resistance means genocide and destruction. Israel's genocide of the Palestinian people, Israel's Hannibal directive on the 7th of October, all of these things were made there deliberately to hide the fact that the Palestinian resistance succeeded in having unprecedented operations against the Israeli army. Now, they would tell you that if you listen to the Israeli side, they'll tell you, for example, Gaza will never be rebuilt. It will never happen until all of them are out. We heard many of these statements before. As a matter of fact, we heard during the war that Israel isn't going to stop up until it completely expels the Palestinians from Gaza. We heard that they're not going to stop up until the Palestinian resistance is disarmed. We heard that they're not going to stop the war against Iran till Iran surrenders. We heard that they're not going to stop the war against Hezbollah up until they give up their weapons. That's part of their psychological warfare. And we need to understand and learn more about psychological warfare. You defeat your enemy's mentality and spirit before you defeat them physically on the ground. That's what they're doing. That's what this propaganda machine is intended to do, to defeat the people, the peace loving people across the world who are seeking genuine human rights and equality across the board and good values and for good to prevail on this earth from having any hope because from their perspective they want to show the entire world that that would mean that you all would die. So the Gaza situation is directly linked with Iran. Had it not been for Iran, there wouldn't have been a Palestinian resistance, and Israel would have potentially replicated the same plan and execution that they're doing in the West Bank, which is genocide in the sly. How many people have they expelled from Jenin in the past 2.5 years? There's genocide happening there. There's an ethnic cleansing campaign happening there. They could have done that in Gaza had it not been for any resistance that is fully supported by Iran, but without the world knowing. The only difference is we had a situation where the Palestinians, who are constantly under this evil pressure and evil brutality of Zionism, responded to Zionism. Zionism implemented plans that they had from a very long time ago because after the ethnic cleansing campaign of 1948, which was called Plan Dalit, they had other plans that weren't implemented at the time. Moshe Dayan wanted to implement one of them before. All of them were put in drawers. The situation in Gaza is a continued attempt of the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. However, we have a situation now where Israel, instead of killing the Palestinian cause, has made billions of people across the world Palestinians. It made them Palestinians in the form of advocates for the cause, people who stand up for justice and human rights, people who expose Zionism for what it is. So, the reality of the situation is as follows: it's more hopeful than ever. However, both Israel and the United States would make it want to appear the absolute opposite, because if they do have certain developments that work in the favor of the Palestinians, like, for example, immediate rebuilding, or all of a sudden we're seeing more progress in Gaza, that would be viewed as a victory. They don't want to give the Palestinian people that, because it would give the message to everyone that we can attack them, we will be hit, but we will rebuild later on. Israel wants to delay that as much as possible. It will eventually happen. But Netanyahu, to be more accurate, wants to delay that as much as possible so that he can at least tell his base, look, Gaza is in ruins. I'm still in Lebanon. I'm still not done with Iran, regardless of what the United States says, because I am the only true leader of Israel, so they can vote again for him. And I will not be surprised if he pulls out another trick literally within the next 1 to 2 months, because there's elections happening in Israel, so that he can gain back that popularity. He's losing in the polls in Israel. Recent polls showed that the gap is expanding. The opposition is getting more and more ahead of him, and he would need to do something that would prove to his base and to the Israelis that he is the only one.
Yeah, and the demotivating thing is, of course, that it doesn't even matter if it's Netanyahu or any of the other nutcases. I mean, they're all crazy over there, and they're all dangerous. And on the other hand, I mean, what you're saying is so true. I mean, he's probably gonna pull another trick out of his head, Netanyahu, because that guy is is so incredibly sly. While I know that the whole society is a problem, I'm also really, really hoping to not see that man anymore. But
I think everyone is.
yeah, one can hope, indeed, Mahmoud. One can hope. Anyway, thank you so much for your time and your updates. These were excellent, and hopefully see you again soon.
Pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Static crackles, voices rise. Truth breaks through their velvet lies. A screen of fire, a shield of steel. BettBeat media makes you feel no borders, no change, no silence.